Hi, everyone. I think you all know me by now, but my name is Samantha Bucheri, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to Tallan's Executive Roundtable. Today's conversation features individuals that we curated from across the country who work for and with public water utility organizations. In a minute, I'm going to introduce our moderator for today, but before I turn things over to her, I'd just like to thank you again, our participants, for taking the time to join us. I can only imagine how busy you are, especially with everything 2020 has thrown our way. But I've mentioned it before, and I just want to say how excited I am about this conversation today and what hopefully it can provide for all of us that are participating on Microsoft Teams. I wish we were able to physically be together, so hopefully this is kind of just a catalyst for us to be able to get together in person someday when we safely can. So without taking up any more time, I'm going to get the ball rolling here on the subject we're going to cover, like digital initiatives in the public water utility space. I want to make sure everyone has a chance to introduce themselves. And so now I'm thrilled to turn things over to Amanda Howard from Microsoft. Amanda is a senior data and AI specialist who works in the state and local government space. She's an industry expert in public utilities, as well as someone who can provide a deep insight into the more technical side of our subject matter. So, Amanda, the proverbial floor is yours.
Hi, good morning from Denver, Colorado. I'm excited to be here. I think we're going to have a good conversation. So as a state and local government data and AI specialist, I spend my days as a technical advisor, so helping customers architect their data and AI solutions. And this ranges the whole gamut. So migrating transactional databases to Azure, because you've got a data center contract expiring, aging hardware, capacity needs, to what I think is some of the fun stuff, designing data warehouse and advanced analytics solutions, and then increasingly IoT and edge scenarios as well, which we might dip into today. And while I would like to say, even though I do work with customers in the utility space, I am a cloud technology expert. I'm not a water utility expert like all of you on the call. I was reading through the American Waterworks Association's industry report last night because I was, craving some light reading. And the survey participant breakdown was 45% of the participants had over 20 years of water experience. And after reading that, I was like, I can't compete. So you guys are the experts. I'm just here to facilitate the conversation and kind of poke at maybe where technology can help, but I'm really going to let you all take it where it goes. And I just want to say I'm going to try to stay away from buzzwords like digital transformation, digital disruption, smart water. But I do work for Microsoft, and I think they just download those terms into me overnight. So I apologize if there's any eye-rolling induction from my part. I'll try to take the gloss off as much as possible. But I just really want to help you all share your initiative because I know we've got a range of size of utility and kind of where you are on your digital evolution, if you are even going down that route. So to kick it off, if you all could introduce yourself. We did this a little bit at our last call, but we've got some new people on the call, and I think this would help get us started. So introduce yourself, where you work, your role, and just really what you're looking to get out of today's events based on your role and your organizational goals. And so we'll just go alphabetical to get us started, and then probably get more organic from here. So Calandis, do you mind kicking us off?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Well, once again, good morning, everybody. Well, good evening to those of you who are on the actual East Coast. Good afternoon, rather. My name is Calandis Mason, and I'm fairly new to the water industry. I'm the IT manager here at the Birmingham Waterworks, and I've been here for about 4 months now. And here at the Birmingham Waterworks, located in Birmingham, Alabama, we serve more than 600,000 residents in the major water supply for the city of Birmingham, and many other cities and municipalities around the Jefferson County area. My role is pretty much here at the Waterworks is to just streamline the operations, of the IT department, to make sure that I'm aligning the actual business objectives with the technology objectives of the company. Also, just planning and coordinating, directing, leading all implementations from technology across the board. What I'm looking to gain out of today's event is pretty much just get a leadership advantage here to understand what other leaders are doing in the water industry, to support their organization, to drive change and to be more innovative, by providing that continued support and just keeping the technology going and keeping the business operating.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. And then Jared, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Yep. Jared Brown, Vice President of Data and Analytics at Tallan. Kind of my initial exposure to the water industry was through DC Water, working close with Tom on some projects there, which kind of evolved into some other, water utilities, Loudoun and Philly. Yeah, pleasure to kind of help bring everybody together, to kind of amplify that message. So thanks everybody for coming.
Awesome. And then Jeffrey from Aqua America.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff Walworth from Aqua America. I am on the East Coast, so I'm going to roll with good afternoon. I actually work now we've rebranded, I mentioned this last week, work for a company called Essential, which does entail Aqua America. But we recently also bought People's Natural Gas out of Pittsburgh. So we're in both water and gas now. But I'm a water guy. I'm the classic stat that you were reading about, Amanda. I'm 22-ish years into my water career. Also have experience in electric, so I'm a utility person through and through. I'm here because recently, I guess it was effective September 1st, we created a new function at Essential, enterprise architecture, right? Obviously, we always did architecture at some level, but we created a formal group, enterprise architecture, to oversee, the integration of all the different companies that we've been acquiring. So I lead that group. My goal here is to start to get a more holistic view of technology. I'm an infrastructure and cybersecurity guy for the last 20 years, so getting into some of this other stuff is new for me. So I'm excited about hearing what other companies are doing, and it's also a great opportunity, as Calandis did, just to collaborate with some other thought leaders in the industry.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're missing John Cherry right now, so we'll skip over John. Michael, yes, we do have Michael. Michael, City of Wichita.
Didn't want to try that last name. So I'm the CIO for the city. So we have a water utilities as part of our public works function, but we oversee I have technology responses for all departments. So police, fire, public works, cultural services, parks, rec. So sometimes that can be good and sometimes that can be bad. So from the good perspective, we can incorporate technologies across the organization, and it can enhance, right? We get proposition values, right, because of economies of scale. But at the same time then, and I've had this with airport because we oversee that as well, where I just can't be an expert, so to speak, in every aspect of, in this case, water utilities. And so looking for some of those ideas. I read a lot. So seeing opportunities like Memphis, I think, and Detroit, using some of their vehicles with AI to capture to use for asset management, for example. So some of those kind of ideation things that I think are important that you might not see if you don't have conversations like this. Well, we'll see it, you'll hear it. So that's kind of why I was interested in this call, is just to see some from some of, and hear from some of the folks that actually this is their primary focus, and see if there's some things that we can take back to the utility.
Great. From Loudon, I don't think he's made it quite yet.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Sorry, I've got all these squares. Here you go. Hi, Mike.
Hi, good afternoon. So I'm on the East Coast. It's afternoon for me. So I'm Mike Beardsley. I'm the director of IT for Loudon Water. I like to say that I'm kind of the new guy there. I've only been there about 15 years. And so that's not unusual in many utilities, as some of you have noted. We have a lot of folks that are very long tenured. Even within our IT team, there are a number of folks on my team that are that have longer tenures than I do. So Loudon Water, if you're not familiar with us, we're kind of a medium-sized water and wastewater utility in Northern Virginia, just on the western side of Dulles Airport. Our claim. But we now live amongst the probably the largest concentration of data centers in the country, perhaps even in the world. It's, Ashburn, Virginia has been called the Silicon Valley of the East, and there's these giant buildings that are popping up all over our neighborhoods. So our internet service is really great here in Ashburn. I think it's probably better than almost anywhere else in the world. Loudon Water and the county itself is growing quickly. So that's one of our probably unique challenges. Our infrastructure is relatively young in comparison to a lot of other utilities, although it's aging. And we like to say that as a utility, we're kind of making that transition between really focused on growth to running, transitioning to running as a utility and maintaining our assets rather than focusing on that growth. So I'm interested in participating because it's always great to meet other folks in the industry, find out what they're doing, pick up new ideas. We have not always the same problems, but often similar problems. And so if you understand how somebody else is tackling a similar problem, you can pick up new ideas and take it in new directions. I know a couple of you. I did want to mention, I knew your predecessor, I'm sorry, if I get your name right, Calandis, your predecessor at Birmingham Waterworks Board. We traded notes over the years. So if there's anything you're interested in, we have some similarities in our environments and would be happy to trade notes at some later date. So thanks for allowing me to participate.
Awesome. This is exactly what we wanted, some sharing across agencies. So thank you, Mike. Ting Lu, Clean Water Services.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm Ting Lu. I'm the business practice leader for digital solutions at Clean Water Services. So for those of you who don't know Water Services, we are in the Pacific Northwest. So our service population is about 600,000 population there. So I'm leading the day-to-day IT implementation, as well as responsible for innovation and looking to IT, OT, and ET integration. So my background is in environmental engineering. So I'm also kind of new to the IT world. I started my role a couple of years ago with the agency there. I think for Clean Water Services, we have a pretty solid foundation on IT infrastructure and applications. Where I like to learn a little bit more is on data analytics and to look for more of this AI and other technologies there. So I'm really glad to be here and learning what others are doing.
Awesome, thank you. Tom Kaczynski, DC Water.
Oh yes, Tom Kaczynski, DC Water. Like Jeff, I'm a multi-utility guy. I have electric, gas, and water, but unlike Jeff, I'm a gas transplant. So I came to water 7 years ago. I spent most of my time in the natural gas industry. We serve the District of Columbia for potable water, but we do wastewater treatment for the region. We have the largest advanced wastewater treatment plant in the world. We process about 300 million gallons a day through that facility. And I think we got some pipe in the street that's probably twice the age of our oldest employee. So unlike Mike Beardsley, we got a lot of old pipe. and on both the collection side and on the distribution side as well. But I think, the reason why Mike and I participate in another organization where we are able to share some ideas, and I think, having the ability to chat with people about what they're doing, what we're doing, and exchange ideas and generate some new thinking is really important, I think, for the industry as a whole.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Tommy.
So you don't want to try my last name either?
Higginbotham?
Higginbotham, that's right.
Yeah, there we go.
So my name's Tommy Higginbotham. I'm the Director of IT at Clayton County Water Authority. Like Calandis, I'm actually pretty new to this position. I've only been in my seat since the beginning of August. Similar to others in the room, I started in a different world. I came from a local government background, and then I actually moved into the electric cooperative industry for a while. I actually lived out in Colorado Springs area this time last year, so you can keep the snow. Now live in Georgia, so just south of Atlanta. We are a pretty good sized water, wastewater, and sewer stormwater utility. I'm not going to do a good job of towing the company line here, but I do know that we service about 250,000 residents in our area just south of Atlanta. Still getting kind of familiar with the industry as a whole. So the idea behind participating today was to learn more about the challenges and solutions that other utilities are embracing and how you're using, the data information that you're collecting to make business decisions or solving issues around that data management. We're currently exploring some new options around that and replacing some aging technology on our side. We've actually started exploring some of the Power BI tools, which is how I got invited into this panel. So I'm excited to be here. Love to collaborate and work with other folks and talk about the different challenges and experiences, and hope to glean some of your experience and maybe offer some insights of my own as we go through it.
Awesome. Thanks, Tommy. Yeah, Power BI can kind of be the gateway drug into the cloud. I don't know if that's Microsoft's way of putting it, but that's my way of putting it. Awesome. So speaking of the cloud, I'm going to try and not say the word cloud too many times today, but I do want to get a gauge of...
Amanda, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I don't think Paul was able to introduce himself. We were able to get him involved just last week, so he may not have been on the list that you had, but yeah, Paul is from Charleston, so I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure he had a chance to kind of say who he was and where he's from.
Oh, perfect. I didn't have him on my list, so welcome, Paul. Come on down.
I was just going to audit the whole thing. Have Paul Hansen. I'm Director of IT, Charleston Water System in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm listening to Tommy. I'm a whole lot in Tommy's boots, shoes or whatever, because I'm relatively new to this position. And I'm, as far as what y'all doing, I'm here to see what everybody's doing, because we are in the beginning throes or middle throes, I'm not quite sure, of a ERP implementation with Dynamics. And that's how I ended up here. And we have a whole lot of aging technology from the IT side that we have to figure out how to move once we go past Dynamics, how we move to a more modern world. And I don't know how to do it. So I'm going to listen to y'all and figure out at least some kind of path down the road to take the next step.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Welcome aboard. So as I was saying, I'm just going to try not to say the word cloud throughout this, but I probably have to say it to kick us off. So just to get a gauge of where we are from a technology perspective across all of these agencies, and you kind of all got into that a little bit already. And if you could explain kind of your cloud footprint at your organization, and then along with that, is your organization embracing the cloud, or are you feeling more embracing or hesitation when it comes to the cloud? Is this part of your digital innovation? Does anyone want to start? Yeah. I'm going to try and not just call people out the whole time.
I'll start if unless anybody wants to go ahead. Is it okay to go ahead?
Oh, yeah.
So I'll give you hopefully a short summary of where we are. I tried to estimate this before the call, and I think Loud and Water is probably in the neighborhood of 75% in on the cloud. Most of that is Microsoft products and services. A lot of that is Azure. Probably around 40 to 50% of that is Azure infrastructure. So we're extensively using Azure infrastructure as a service. We moved SAP to Azure, so our ERP solution is SAP, and that's finance, procurement, asset and work order management, filling and customer service, HR. We're all in on SAP, and that's all running on Azure. And that was a good move for us. The cloud is just another way to deliver solutions for your customers, and some of us talked a little bit about that before. But it means for us that we can be more nimble. We can get assistance more easily in managing our Azure environment. We can hand off managing that environment from one service provider to another, and we've actually recently done that pretty seamlessly. So there's real advantages to being in the cloud because of the flexibility it offers to spin up and spin down resources, and we all know that about cloud services. So that's infrastructure as a service, but we're also embracing a lot of SaaS solutions as well. Really, almost everything else we look at is SaaS, and not because it's in the cloud, but because that's where vendors are innovating, right? It's hard to find vendors innovating on premise and upgrading and offering significant new functionality on premise. You're almost forced to go to the cloud. And so rather than dig our heels in, we've kind of embraced that. And again, it allows us to deploy solutions more quickly. We're less focused, of course, on infrastructure, more focused on some of the things that IT has to focus on because the business doesn't have skills or abilities around these things. And those are security, governance, integration, right? Those are really things that IT does well, contracting, right? Risk management. Those are things that IT should be good at that the business isn't going to be good at. And then the business is focused on the business solutions part of it. But our team still shifts our focus from managing infrastructure to managing the solution and getting closer to the business so that we're more aligned with their needs and delivering solutions that ultimately meet their requirements. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but we're really embracing it because that's just where technology is headed, and we can deliver solutions more nimbly for our customers.
Thanks, Mike. Do you want to come on calls with me in the future?
What was that? Sorry.
Do you want to come on all my calls with me in the future?
Happy to do it. By the way, I forgot to mention we're also we have a pretty significant BI initiative as well, and I think Tom has an even better story to tell there. I know he's going to get to it, but we recently stood up a BI solution with Power BI, Databricks, a data lake. So that's integrated with SAP and GIS, and we're going to bring SCADA data and our AMI data into that environment, and it's going to make it a lot easier to expose those rich analytics to our customers internally. So we're really excited about the steps we've taken so far and where we're headed with that.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I think today we got these data talk tracks, these infrastructure tracks. So I'm glad we're touching on both of them. Tom, I'll jump on you. I
think Jeff was ahead of me, I think.
Oh, he beat me. Okay, Jeff.
I'm quick. I'm like a Jeopardy person when it comes to hitting the hand. Hey, Mike, kind of a bit of a tactical question, but you may have said it and I missed it. But when you guys went to infrastructure as a service for SAP, were you on premise first and then did a migration, or did you build out in the cloud to start?
Yeah, we went live with SAP in 2016 on premise, and then we migrated it to Azure in 2014, and then did an upgrade and a migration to Azure in 2018.
We're in the process. I mentioned earlier, we just bought a gas utility company. They're SAP. Aqua, the water side, we're not. So we're going through, literally just kicked off our SAP transition. And that was kind of our debate on premise or cloud. I think we landed on premise, but I'm curious, how was that transition for you guys? It sounded like it was actually pretty smooth. Or?
It was, it wasn't cheap, but actually, it wasn't that difficult. We had an upgrade that was part of the process, so that was probably made it a little bit more challenging. Of course, we didn't have to shell out the capital costs for new infrastructure, but the carrying cost monthly for Azure infrastructure is not cheap. I will say that you're not going to save necessarily money, but you'll gain flexibility, and that has been a bonus for us. But otherwise, I would say it wasn't terribly challenging. I think it was a good move for us. And actually, I would say also performance improved by moving to the cloud. It did not drop. That was, of course, we didn't want it to go down, but I was actually pleasantly surprised with how much it improved just by moving to newer, faster infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
Tom.
Yeah. So we've had an aggressive cloud first approach for I guess the last 2.5 years. And I'd say we're probably at about 97% in the cloud at this point in time. Our last major migration was to Oracle's cloud. Can you hear me? Or okay. So our last major migration was, so we got a combination of public and private cloud implementations. So we got a multi-cloud environment for a number of our applications. A lot of those applications are under managed service agreements with third-party providers as well. So they run the application for us. They maintain it. They also do all the patching and everything else. So like Mike, we run SAP for our billing system, our customer billing system, but it's through Vertex One, which is a service provider, but it's SAP under the covers. And they actually used to run in a private cloud, and they've recently migrated it to our Azure tenant at this point in time. But we run everything from financials, Maximo, ArcGIS, our HR systems. We've got a major investment in Power BI that we've been rolling out over the last year. We're migrating away from Business Objects as our primary data analytics tool to Power BI. I'd say we're about 75% there. We still got a lot of the old SAP stuff running on BobJ, but other than that, I mean, almost everything we have at this point. Our call management platforms, cloud-based, Genesis cloud-based call management platform, voice over IP across the organization. Like Mike said, it gives you flexibility that you didn't have in an on-premise environment, but also gives you the ability to upgrade more quickly, especially in our case, since our contracts include those upgrades as part of the service that we pay. But the fact that we were largely in the cloud really allowed us to do a pretty seamless migration to work from home as part of COVID. So all of our administrative workforce has been working from home since March, and will likely be working exclusively from home through the end of the year and well beyond that at this point in time.
I got one quick little anecdote, if you don't mind, on Tom's story. We were doing some work, and we were working exclusively out of our office, so we had whitelisted IP addresses, in terms of the virtual network. And when we went remote, it raised some red flags from a Azure security perspective, and all of a sudden there was a request why someone was connecting from Jersey. So just kind of a interesting point there.
Awesome. Calandus, I think you had your hand up next, so let's jump over to you. And you're on.
I'm still muted.
Nope, you're good to go now.
Okay. Well, unlike Mike and Tom, our vast majority of the infrastructure is probably about 60 to 70% on-prem. As far as SAP, Exchange, the VoIP phone system, we even have some storage that's on-prem. But we have a new executive team here, and they're very much on board with the direction that we're looking to take, IT to. So they're not against the actual cloud migration. Some of the conversations I've been having with managers is about pretty much migrating that ArcGIS Pro system to the cloud. We're currently about to do a Chronos implementation in the cloud as well. We're using Azure, that's in the cloud as well. But I think one of the biggest reasons for, our organization probably delaying it is probably just the lack of the IT personnel that is trained, in the cloud technology. Vast majority of my personnel, they're comfortable with, the server maintenance and the network and application management. But, as Tom was saying, going to the cloud does provide you that flexibility of working remote, being able to connect from anywhere. But, for the most part, I think we're getting some good support here. I think we're going to shift things around. If we have the same meeting next year, hopefully I'll be able to say, I'm on the opposite end at that point in time.
I like to hear that. And yeah, we're definitely, workforce skilling is something we hear all the time across the board. We know that there's a learning curve there, and obviously that's part of my job is helping companies get to that point from a skilling perspective as well. But we're definitely hearing that. I saw Mike Mata's hand up, and then Ting, you'll be next. Mike, I think you might be on mute.
Sorry.
There we go.
Our utilities is the one moneymaker actually for the city. We serve a little over 400,000 people. And then we outsource some of our water systems to local entities as well. And I mentioned this on our call before, we're in a hybrid environment. We will always be in a hybrid environment. We'll keep some systems on premise just because we can save money. And we have 60, which is really not that many, considering the breadth of what we do. But so I have staff on hand that can manage those systems. And it's just, quite frankly, it's cheaper. Azure is a great system. We use it. We're looking at the Power Platform, Power BI, Power Automate. We'll use those extensively across the organization, not only in the utilities. But I think, again, and since we have a Microsoft person, I always have to be careful. I love Microsoft. We've been in 365. We've been on that platform for years in the cloud. So don't get me wrong. The cloud, when it needs to be, is good. I agree with some of the folks that have talked about your ability to spin up and spin down. And I think in the private sector that works really well. But for us, we're talking about budgets for 2022 now. So we don't really have to worry about, there's not a lot of change that we have that comes upon us quickly. So we tend to plan these a little more, and quite frankly, it's just saved us money, right? Sending data to Azure is cheap. Getting data back from Azure is really expensive. Well, maybe not really, but it's more expensive. So again, we just look at it from a dollars and cents perspective. So Amanda will not want to take me on have me on her calls, but I think for us, we try and be pragmatic about, where do we put it? What makes the most sense? A lot of our smaller systems are in the cloud, and you're right. We're getting to the point where vendors, you're not going to have a choice, right? Because vendors, quite frankly, that you can make more money, right, by leasing, and that's really what you're doing when you go to the cloud. And so it's they can make more money that way, and that's fine. And you get the upgrades, and there's a lot. But when you're talking about, to me, the issue becomes, how do you integrate, right? Because you have to integrate SAP, BI platforms. You have to integrate all these platforms. They have to talk to each other. And when you get into hybrid environments, right, that creates a few more challenges, especially as it relates to security issues. So you have to really be cognizant about, what that look like, and make sure you take that bigger picture view of, where are we putting it, and not just for that point in time, but right, looking out over time, how am I going to connect those things, right, securely with all the systems that it needs to connect to, so I can get data right back and forth and make sure that we get information to the folks that need it. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken is just looking at, where does it make the most sense? Because like I said, I think pretty much everybody to some degree, we're all going to be in a hybrid environment. I mean, that's just the nature of IT today.
Great point. Yeah, and I mostly see hybrid environments, and multi-cloud too. I mean, hybrid and from like edge on-prem to Azure, but we also are seeing I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but multi-cloud approaches as well. So we know there's not a one-size-fit model. So I appreciate that feedback, and I do want to plant a seed. I'm going to go to Ting next because her hands was up. But from a cost, we've got the cost saving side. I know that Tom at DC Water, and I'm sure others as well, have a ROI story that was possible through the cloud, just through more like predictive analytics, predicting main breaks and stuff like that. So maybe plant that seed, and maybe we can circle back to that side of the cost savings as well. So Ting, you're next.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting discussion. I think for us right now we are hybrid.
Oops, sorry, we've got a little bit of a feedback on.
Okay, sorry about that. Let me try that. Maybe you can go to the next person. I'll try to fix it.
Okay, we'll circle back to you. So we got Jeff.
Yeah, I think I may have been jumping the gun just a little bit, Amanda, with my question. I was getting all excited over here listening to all this good information. But you kind of touched on the ROI piece, and I'm interested to hear what the group here has to say. When you talk about ROI, it's a little bit different in the utility model, right? Like we try to stay typically kind of capital heavy and OpEx lean. I'm assuming a lot of the other folks here have that same challenge when you're trying to get into the cloud. So I'm curious how folks here build out that ROI model in the business case to get approval on some of these cloud-based initiatives.
So I can give you some perspective. Certainly the CapEx OpEx issue is a huge one for a lot of, especially for the investor-owned utilities who get a return on capital spend, right? A guaranteed return on capital spend, and they don't want to shift away from capital investments to operating because they, in theory, lose that. There's a lot of movement in the accounting sectors, or the not the accounting sectors, but the public utility commissions to consider what changes would be appropriate to address that issue for the utilities. But I think the other thing that when you're thinking about this is you have to remember is, not all of your costs when you go to the cloud have to be operating. Your implementation costs can be capitalized. So a lot of the implementation effort and everything like that. And in our case, we buy a lot of our licenses, even though we run them in the cloud. And we do that for the reasons that Mike mentioned, is the flexibility. We have managed services agreements with providers, and if that provider who's managing that environment for us ceases to be a viable alternative to us, we don't want to have to rebuild the entire systems because we want to move it to a different platform or we want to move it to a different provider. So we've bought our licenses for things like SAP and other applications, but we let somebody else run them for us. So and the other thing you really need to think about on the cost benefit side are really the total cost of running a system on premise versus running it in the cloud. And there's a lot of avoided costs when you take that physical asset out of your environment and you put it somewhere else and let somebody else be responsible for it. And that can include things like disaster recovery, backup services that you would have to provide. If you were running it on premise, I mean, just basic things like electricity and things like that. Staffing costs, depending on what you're doing with your staff. If you've got constraints around your workforce. I mean, one of our biggest objectives was to try and move our people away from being just a technical resource for the organization, but being a solution-oriented resource for the organization, so that they can help the business find solutions to their problem, not constantly be sitting there upgrading and patching, all these systems all the time. I mean, the cost of patching alone in a Microsoft environment, not that everybody else doesn't have their own patching, but I mean, you're getting a dozen patches a week or a month. 3/4 of them are critical and they got to be applied right away. I mean, just that exercise of doing that across a portfolio of assets can be very, very costly. And a lot of those things go away. And I think one of the deficiencies in a lot of the ROI calculations that I see is people don't necessarily include the full cost of the on-premise solution and all the peripheral costs that are incurred because you have that physical asset there.
Thank you, Tom. That makes sense.
Can I echo, or I'll wait. Others have their hand up, but I wanted to echo something Tom said. I'll wait my.
We do. I see. Sorry, I'm probably not seeing the hands go up in order, so I'm just grabbing one. Paul.
This is probably way out of a little bit out of line anyway. What kind of for an organization of any size moving from on significant or mostly or entirely on-prem to whatever percentages that I heard 60% and 70% and then 40% for some others, kind of change in physical footprint happens. Are you cutting down 50% of the physical equipment? Or are you losing 60%? Just kind of curious. One reason I ask, just so you know, we are smack in the middle of designing a new data center. Yeah. And they're talking about putting ours, the lights out computer room, and you have to build it separately, a whole new building. So just some idea.
Yeah, I can give you a quick answer on that. I think we've probably cut our on-premise infrastructure by about a third. I like to call this the empty out the data center project. Because that's, essentially we're going to be left with routers and switches and I'm not sure we're going to need half of that if everybody's working from home, but it is probably about a third. We really have emptied it out and we're not done, right? I think, to Tom's point, right? He said he's 90+%. I was thinking about what's left on premise, our file server, domain controller, a couple of line of business, our LIMS application, and one or two others. But GIS, all of our heavyweight ones, GIS, SAP, several others, they're all in the cloud. They're all on Azure. Maybe just to echo one point that Tom made, couldn't agree more about calculating that ROI cost. We did that with SAP when we moved it, and it was closer than we thought because we calculated in DR, backup, and cooling, and electric, and all that stuff, right? That definitely moves the needle. Again, if you have to spend it CapEx, then that becomes a little bit more challenging. But there's lots of tricks you can do with Azure, for example. You can't do on-premise, or you wouldn't want to, like shutting down those machines so you're not paying for them when you're not using them, or using in Azure reserved instances, which is basically just, hey, I'm going to use this for a long period, so give me a discount. And those things can help manage cost. It's still more than we expected, but it becomes a little bit more in line, and it becomes more predictable. I know 3 years from now, I'm not going to have a couple $100,000 hit to replace all that infrastructure, right? It's just a subscription. I pay more or less the same amount every year. But anyway, that's my short answer.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Ting, I see you back up.
Yes, I was just following up on we are taking a pretty much a hybrid model right now, but in the next couple of years, we are going to looking to migrate SharePoint Online, GIS to the cloud, and we're also looking to NeoGov as HR system to be a cloud solution. So I see any of the one-off solutions or kind of the new system where a lot is the cloud options. One question I have for Tom or Mike is when you guys had majority of your application or infrastructure on the cloud, one of the pushback I got from my team is, part is that people are getting used to the patching and upgrade every day. So there's kind of a job security for them in a way. So I'm curious about how your utility is looking to that. And also, what I heard is that when you go to the cloud, even though the vendor does all the patching and upgrade, but there is the requirement for the business side to do the validation, to do the testing that. And I don't know how that time is equivalent when you have the system on-prem.
Yeah, I'll let Tom answer that one if he wants to.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, our contracts, a number of our contracts include a prescribed schedule for upgrades to the underlying application. So we know in advance that we are going to do an upgrade, let's say, to SAP in May of next year, right? So we put that on our roadmap. So that's just a known event that's going to happen. It's like doing evaluations. It's like doing maintenance on an air conditioning unit in the data center, or replacing the batteries in the backup system. So we just put it on the schedule, and at that point it becomes an event that everybody knows is coming, and it gets planned. And we just basically go through the regression testing process as part of a normal everyday activity. And then we plan everything else around those known events. So the rest of our IT roadmap gets mapped around those known events so that we make sure we have the resources available when they're necessary. But I think that's one of the things that, again, that's not, you could do that internally if you wanted to, but what happens is when you have an on-premise system, a lot of times people go, oh, I can defer this upgrade, or I can defer this upgrade, or I can defer this upgrade because I got these other priorities going on. And then by the time you turn around and look, you're 3 or 4 years behind in patching or upgrading a system. And rather than, just a simple, 2 or 3 week event, it becomes a 6-month event because it's a major upgrade to the application. And I think that's the other thing that, if you apply some of this change management or release management, some of the release management principles to a cloud deployment, you can get more control over your overall environment. And you actually, a lot of times, increase the reliability of the system, and you don't get hit by patches that can't be applied because the physical infrastructure of the system can't be upgraded yet, right? Because it's just too old, right? How many people are running Windows 7 machines out there, right? If you're running a Windows 7 machine, you don't get patches anymore, and all of a sudden you have you get attacked and you have a major problem. So I think it's a combination of things. I think it's really rethinking, not only, where the asset sits, but how you manage that asset as well.
Thank you, Tom.
Awesome. And Mike Mehta, you have your hand up.
I'm trying to remember to take it off mute this time. Again, folks, I think, it depends on what your environment is. For us, we've been virtualized for years. For us to spin up something else on premise is pretty easy for us. I have folks that do that. Doesn't mean we don't go to the cloud and we don't look at that, but just from a cost perspective, it makes more sense for us in many cases. Now, we are pushing a lot of stuff out to the cloud. One of the things that I want to make sure everybody realizes is that as you do that, one of the projects that we put in place was redundancy on our internet, right? Because now you start pushing stuff out and you lose that pipe, you lose everything. And so what we've done now is, and many, right, probably already have this in place. I always play the poor municipality because we never have money, except for our utilities. Actually, our utilities are the only ones that have any money in the city. But so we look at that, right? And we have to, you have to consider that, because now that becomes a critical point, right? A critical failure point. you have that goes down, and you have folks that can't work. So it's just, I think it comes down to basic business, right? It's grab the numbers. If it makes sense, go to the cloud, and not just the numbers, right? It's always a value proposition. So it can't just be, is it going to cost us $20,000 more to go to the cloud? Well, but if I'm in an environment where I need to have that mobility and I want to be able to shut down and bring up and do those things and not have to patch and not have to then go to the cloud, because the value proposition is there, right? It all, a lot of times this kind of comes down to common sense, I think, is you just look at, does it make sense for your organization and for your business, right, to be able to do the things that they need to be able to do in a secure manner and provide a customer experience that's exceptional. If you can do those things, regardless of where you put it, you're going to be successful. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what we're all shooting for, right? Is for me, it's the success of that department. And so our citizens, right, can pay their water bills, can get their water. When they flush the toilet, it actually works, right? That's kind of important. So it's that simple stuff that I think a lot of times, because you can get into the cloud and that's where you get into digital transformation. Well, of course, right? Everybody's been transforming digitally for 30 years, right? That's just the nature of business. So my point is, I don't think there's any prescriptive that you could say, I'm saying, Calandus, you got to go to the cloud, man. It's the best thing since no. Look at what your situation is, and does it make sense for your organization, and does it provide a value proposition? And if it does, then you need to go there. I just needed to get my soapbox in before I apologize. I have a 12 o'clock that I have to jump off. Also, Ting, we actually use NeoGov and have used it for quite some time. So if you have, questions or things that you need to know about, just pop me an email and I'll see if I can help.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, that's awesome. Let's see here. Calandus, I know you had your hand up, put it down, back up. So I'm just going to grab you real quick, and then I see a bunch of hands going.
Yeah, one last quick pointer on that actual cloud is that one thing that nobody mentioned, and maybe I'm the only person that has experienced this issue, is the actual centralizing of equipment. When I got here months ago, I'm seeing different departments have servers located in their area. Going to the cloud does centralize that location of that equipment. We're in the cloud, one piece of equipment, one location, and not spending all of that money on purchasing new hardware. Sometimes I've seen departments just go out and purchase, new hardware without IT's approval. You go and purchase a Dell server when we're moving to HP, so migrating to the cloud is definitely something that I'm looking forward to do. I know it's going to be very costly, but I think it will definitely solve that issue in a nutshell.
That's a great point. Jeff, you had your hand up. I don't know if it's related to what Calandus said at all, but.
I had my hand up?
You did.
Okay, my trigger finger must be too quick. Sorry, I didn't have anything.
Okay. Let's jump to Paul. You have your hand up as well? Nope, he's gone. Okay, Tom.
Didn't mean to. Sorry about that.
Now, I just want to make a point. Mike made a really excellent point, and it sometimes gets lost. I think in the translation. Your network will become your single point of failure if you go to the cloud, and you need to manage that network like it's the computer now. and you need to do capacity planning on it. You need to have the redundancy in place. You need to have auto failover capabilities. I mean, otherwise, none of this works anymore, right? Because you won't be able to connect to it. So, you know, and a lot of times people don't think about it. They go, oh, I don't have to do capacity planning on the server side anymore. I don't have to do capacity planning, you know, on the internal network anymore. I don't have to do, you know, storage modeling, and I don't have to do database optimization because it's all in the cloud. But then they forget it's all connected through that one wire there. And then once that wire gets cut, and remember that wire runs through all different places. Okay, most of the time you don't even know where that wire is, and you could have a failure because of somebody else's problem, not even your own problem. So that network becomes critical going forward.
I couldn't agree. I would just jump in and say and echo Mike's comment on, and I think Tom yours about diversity of service. That's something we did a couple of years ago, and we have had instances locally where, you know, Verizon might have an issue, but we have a separate redundant carrier, Comcast, with equal service, and so it's a blip. It's really essentially no outage. But years before, when we didn't have that, it would have taken us to our knees.
Mhm.
And so good planning to be out in front of that was critical. I won't say we were fortunate we planned for it, but if we hadn't, we would have been in trouble. I would say one other thing that and this is something we haven't done yet, but we're planning on doing is now, especially now that we're remote, but even prior to this, is looking at, you know, how do your users access the internet, and where's that capacity required? So right now we use NetMotion for our VPN, great VPN solution, but it still requires all of our users to, you know, hairpin through the Loudon Water data center before it gets out to the internet. So because of where we are, the latency is quite low. It's really not noticeable to our users. But if we were distributed geographically, you know, across the nation, that architecture wouldn't work. And so, you know, the best approach is really to split tunnel if you can. So you split tunnel to trusted services, and for us that would be Office, Microsoft Teams, right? Would particularly benefit from split tunneling. So your users that are working remotely go directly to Microsoft, right? And then they come through, you know, the data center for those services they need on premise, or that can only be accessed through on premise, which would probably for us be Azure VPN. So anyway, thinking about that network architecture and split tunneling is going to be important.
That's a great point. So Calandus said the word centralized. He didn't mean it in a data way. He meant it in an infra way, but I'm going to grab that word because I just see, I live in the data world, and often I see the power of the cloud just to help create, there's so many terms for it, data innovation hub, a one source of truth, kind of helping break down those data silos. And the ROI that comes out of that, being able to calculate cost of recovery, and then getting into predictive analytics world as well. I'm just curious on that kind of range of the analytics journey. Do you find your organization more in we're reporting, and maybe what are some of those blockers on your reporting through we're doing predictive analytics, advanced analytics, and what kind of helps you get to that point? Was it the cloud? What's going on with your data journey? Or maybe you just want to talk about infrastructure and throw my question out the window.
No, I can talk a little bit about what we've done. I mean, we made an investment in Bob J about 2.5, 3 years ago because we thought it was the answer to our problem. And really our strategy in IT has been to be the data steward and provide access to data to people, not necessarily be a report generation or a dashboard generation resource, right? Our goal was to create an auditable, reliable source of information and expose a set of tools to the business that would allow them to build the decision support models, the dashboards and things, and move away from a list-based presentation of information to more of a visual presentation layer. That never happened with Bob J, and it's because Bob J is not the most flexible tool in the world, to be honest with you. It requires a lot of experience. We had discounted Power BI back then because it wasn't advanced enough to do some of the things that we had envisioned in our strategy. But we revisited that decision about a year ago because we weren't really able to effectuate our strategy, which was to expose data to people with tools that allowed them to do the analytics that they wanted to. That was really the driver. We could do a lot of what we wanted from a visual perspective on Bob J, but it was still sitting inside of IT. It wasn't creating these resources in the business that could utilize that data asset in a way that we had never envisioned. So then we revisited business or Power BI, and we said we're switching, we're changing gears. This is the way we got to go, and these are the reasons why we want to do it. And we wanted some predictive analytics, some AI capabilities, machine learning capabilities. So we made that leap, and we've been moving down that path now. So we've done some machine learning, predictive analytics stuff. We've got a lot of ideas around what we want to do the next round of this, but we have made huge investments in exposing data sets and then giving people the tools that they can visualize these things in a very different way that actually gives you insights much more quickly than you could ever get them in the past. And it's really been taken up by the business. Some areas of it more than others. Some are a little slower to adopt right now, while others have been, like our plan, our wastewater treatment plan, says just give me access to all the data and I'll do all my stuff on my own, right? And then you get a little scared sometimes, but we've done that at this point, and we have other areas where we help them build the models. We've used outside resources like Tallan to help us build the initial models, but also build the capability in the business with the goal of ultimately having that become the way people do their job, not necessarily a job for people to do, if that makes sense.
That does. Jared, I'm going to pull you in real quick because I saw your hand go up, and then we'll jump to Paul.
Okay, yeah, just so real quick, just to elaborate a little on some of the things that Tom said. Power BI definitely becomes that tool for taking data, getting those rapid prototypes, really quickly kind of achieving some of those business initiatives. But one thing I would just caution about is it's infectious. So then you have other departments using it, and next thing you know, IT's coming back and asking like, hey, there's like 1,000 workspaces out here, right? So don't forget about that piece of governance, because you want to encourage it, but there needs to be that feedback loop through proper DevOps, stewardship, and Power BI doesn't help because they keep coming out with kind of new features. So now there's certified data sets, certified reports. So they're kind of perpetuating the problem as they're solving it. But it's good. You just don't let it get too far ahead. Otherwise, you'll be in that same like Access database, Excel, sprawl that probably all of us have experienced. But it's definitely great for keeping things moving, and kind of encouraging that thought process. Definitely.
Yeah, as data governance always pops into my head, because Power BI, it is infectious. It is that gateway. Paul.
I guess Tom has really brought up one thing that the ERP implementation has got me tremendously excited about, which is as a COBOL back, if I never write another report, I will be a happy man. And I don't think any of my staff should ever produce another report. But one of the things we were always IT was the tail that wagged the dog, and getting users to take ownership of their data and the information they use. They just asked for a report and checked off a line. I wanted them done why they, whatever. Just one of the things that needs to be done has everyone excited. Now they are close to the information they need. They get to pull it. They get to control it. And the group is, I don't know how to encourage the next that's going to come along, which is going to be our customer service, our CRM, or whatever. They're not as sophisticated, so to use an. So that's going to be our challenge going forward, is when we do that next one. This group, as the accountants and finance, they are really into it, and it's going to offload. I don't know how much. I'm going to be able to do it with one support person, and I'm so truly looking forward to that.
That's awesome. Everyone wants to get out of the report building game. So how do you, and that's really the data governance story too, like how do you kind of centralize that governance but empower those end users? We're seeing a lot of that. Kalandis, and then Ting, I saw your hand go up too. So let's. Ooh, on mute.
On mute.
Yeah.
I think my hand was still up from that last question.
Okay.
Yeah, the last discussion. My apologies.
No problem. Ting, I think you have a question or comment?
Yeah, on the data management. So we have a data management hub, so which involves quite a few digital solutions team members and also business analysts across the district to talk about data management. I think it's the first to uncover dark data, just all this, data silos. We don't understand what each other is doing, we're collecting. So that has been working well. And this year we are starting developing a data management lifecycle model, as well as using the data catalog. So I'm not sure any others are using that too. So I would be interested looking at. So we're doing a proof of concept using data catalog to look at our IoT sensor data, looking to metadata and ownership that. The other effort we are doing on data management is to look, because all this sensor data, different data has been brought into business applications and that being integrated in different systems. We're trying to mapping all this out and trying to understand the data model there for the district. So so that's on the data management part. I think for us, we are heavy user on Power BI as well. So that's been going well. We rely on that heavily. And now I'm very interested in doing more on the data analytics, like machine learning, advanced predictive analytics there. And I love to understand more about Microsoft capability there, because if there is already analytic engine there, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel there. So that's where the future direction I'm looking at.
Yeah, definitely don't reinvent the wheel.
Real quick, Ting, what data catalog were you using? Just kind of curious.
We're using the Azure data.
Oh, so just announced today. I don't know if you saw, data catalog Gen 2 is going into public preview. So that's going to be exciting. I don't know, when it's going to go GA, but just figured I would mention.
Yeah, maybe we can follow up on that. We had an effort a couple of years ago with the data catalog. It wasn't successful, so we want to try that again with a good business case there.
Let me find, there's an invite. Satya's, I think, announcing it on the 3rd of December. Let me see if I can find that invite and I'll put it in the chat.
Great.
It's so much better than Gen 1.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah, there's so much more baked into it. Data lineage, a wider range of on-prem sources, and it's really exciting. And it's been in the making forever. So really excited about that. And then it's baked into our data warehouse story, which is Synapse as well, which we're coming up on time here, but definitely have an advanced analytics story that we can talk about. And oh man, we've just got 2 minutes left before we start doing the wrap up, but I just want to get a gauge, because I heard the term IoT. I just I'm curious across the board how much like modern IoT I know is being used at your agency. I know Tom's got a good amount of it.
Well, it depends on what you count as IoT, but no, I mean, we use we've got sensors, pressure sensors, we've got sensors in the sewer flow and level sensors. We've got rain gauges throughout the district. We've got, all of our traditional SCADA connections and the like too. But I think the challenge with IoT is how you, and I think somebody mentioned it earlier, but I coined this term a long time ago when somebody asked me what the CIO is, and I said it's the Chief Integration Officer, because that's what your job has become. The reality is that making these things work together is the biggest challenge we have today. It's not about whether or not I can deploy 1,000 sensors tomorrow. I can do that, very easily. What I can't do is integrate those sensors into an existing SCADA platform, and nor do I want to really integrate them into a SCADA platform. But what I want to do is I want to blend that IoT data with the traditional SCADA data I have with some business data and some other third-party sources for managing information so that people have a holistic view of what our system as a whole is doing. We had a major flooding event in September, early September, and one of the challenges in that, we had 3 inches of rain in 20 minutes up in Northeast DC that flooded over 300 properties. And what we didn't have was a way to look at customer calls coming in, emergency response team calls coming in, visually on a map, and then understand what our stormwater pump stations were doing, what the flow in the sewer was, how much rain was actually coming down, what the predictions from outside were, in a more comprehensive, holistic, system-wide view. We couldn't see that. We had all the pieces of data. We just couldn't see it visually, what was really happening. So what's coming out of that is this project called FloodWatch, which is really going to integrate our SCADA systems, our sensor network with our customer calls and our work management platform using a geospatial view so that we can look and see, basically where the flood is going down through our service territory, or correlate work orders or customer calls into a single area. And rather than trying to dispatch 4 crews to deal with 4 flooding calls that are on the same street but are being driven by 4 different people, we can dispatch 1 crew to deal with all 4 work orders. And then we also can get, bring in the weather data from outside, so we know what the duration of the storm is going to be and things like that. So it's really, the IoT stuff is great, but it's also got to be part of a larger system. It can't stand on its own and be as valuable as it potentially can be.
Great point. Mike, I see your hand up, and then might have to start wrapping up after that.
Yeah, so in a similar vein, I think we see the same challenges of integrating IoT devices. I think this is also a problem on the vendor side. Because vendors operate in silos, they create these solutions that don't work with each other. And so you have, one vendor who has a solution for pressure monitoring on hydrants, another one that does some kind of water quality monitoring. Perhaps you have multiple solutions on the sewer side, all on different standards, different technology platforms, no obvious way to backhaul it, lots of redundancy in the cellular infrastructure that's required to collect that data and then backhaul it. And all with different levels of security maturity, right? So, and that's a big challenge in the IoT space, right? A lot of these sensors are inherently insecure, aren't particularly engineered to be secure, and so bringing those into a pure OT environment gives us real heartburn. And you want to kind of keep them separate. So those are all challenges I see again from the vendor side. They don't talk to each other well, and then bringing them back and synthesizing that data to make meaningful sense of it is a real challenge.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So I'm bummed we're coming to an end here. So I hope everyone found this productive. I think we had a wide range of technology and just kind of utility size. So hopefully you found the knowledge share to be helpful. And I don't want it to stop here either. Like this is a cohort, and hopefully we can continue these conversations. And just thank you for giving your time. Time's a precious commodity these days. And we all have a lot of meetings on our calendars. I think working remote made all of our calendars blow up. You don't even get those like 30 minutes to drive anywhere anymore. So appreciate you allowing us to try to find a spot in your day. And Sam, do you have anything to add on to that?
No, I mean, you covered it very well. I think the most important thing for me, again, is that you all thought this was time well spent. We will be sending another email out just to make sure that you all have conveniently located contact information for any of the little side questions that you may have had or advice you want to ask from each other. I would love to be able to host this again. I was so serious when I said at the beginning of this that I'd love to be able to meet you all in person and physically shake your hand someday. So fingers crossed that maybe we can make that happen. But, you know, worst case scenario, maybe in a few months as time passes further and COVID changes things yet again, but maybe back a little bit to where we were almost a year ago. I can't believe I'm saying that. So we can pick up where we left off. And if things have changed with all of you, you can maybe provide a little bit of perspective. Maybe, you know, initiatives will have started, some things will have ended, and you'll have learned lessons that may benefit the rest of the group. So keep your eye on your email. Please feel free to ask me for anything, any questions or anything you might need from us. And I'm happy to kind of be a centralized point to keep you all in touch. I guess if anybody has any closing remarks, I would welcome to hear from you. If you have any immediate questions, feel free. Otherwise, I hope you all have a really great Thanksgiving next week, however big or small or independent it may be of what your traditions normally are.
Yeah. This is Jared. You know, if there's any technical questions too, I mean, go through Sam or reach out to me either way. She'll track me down. Happy to help out. Amanda, I'm sure, you know, would be just as willing to do so. And wanted again to thank everybody for coming. And, you know, I know we're very focused on like the business side of things, but, you know, the services that you are all providing are very important. And I want to thank you for that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody's time.
Yeah, thanks everyone so much.
Thank you.
Well, I'll talk soon. Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks
all.
Bye.